Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you very much for watching our online side event for the launch of the very first APS Alumni Network's ebook entitled Reshape Peacebuilding in Asia During and After COVID-19, Achievements, Challenges, and Prospects. I am Maya Mizuno, a program coordinator of the University for Peace, and I will be your host for this event. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome you all. University for Peace in Costa Rica and Ateneo de Manila University in the Philippines started the Asian Peace Builder Scholarship APS program in 2006 with the support of the Nippon Foundation in Japan in order to provide professionals in the Asia region with higher education opportunity to develop their knowledge and skills contributing to the global peace. As of today, about 400 scholars were graduated from the APS program. The University for Peace has been collaborating with the APS Alumni Network to implement various activities that mobilize their experiences, talents, and expertise, not only to strengthen their network, but also to contribute, bringing the positive impact on the societies. Last year, APS Alumni Network dedicated to create an ebook with the selected alumni writers on the topic of peace building during and after COVID-19. And finally, it is ready to be published. So today we open this side event to hear more practices and insights from other APS alumni members and learn about their achievements, challenges, and prospects. To complement the contents of the ebook, we hope that you get inspiration from their stories. Now, I would like to invite my colleague, Ms. Gayatri Gamagi, APS Alumni Officer, to facilitate the presentations and discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maya, and welcome everyone to our event on practices and challenges and experiences of our peace building initiatives during and after COVID-19. Of course, we all know with the changes happened, with new experiences, our practices changed and took new shapes and many transformative initiatives. And we are excited to hear what your experiences. We would like to first invite Auntie Alegre, APS 10, our alumni from Philippines, and the floor is yours. You can start your experience sharing.
Thank you, Gayatri. I'm grateful and just thankful to the APSAN for inviting me to share my experience and work in this research engagement. Allow me to share my PowerPoint. Can you see it now?
It is, yes, it is processing. Yes, we can very well see it now.
All right, thank you. So good day to everyone who is watching us all over the globe. I would like to share the context of the present human trafficking situation in the Philippines, specifically on the issue of child sexual exploitation at the time of the pandemic. I am Andy Alegre. I work for a nonprofit organization as well as a lecturer at the La Salle University, Manila, here in the Philippines. So the COVID-19 pandemic has greatly affected lives, the economy, and our system of learning. At the same time, perpetrators of violence use the situation as an opportunity to exploit the marginalized and vulnerable, becoming more innovative in their illicit engagements. According to UNOCHR, the risk of exploitation occurring in times of conflict can be connected from existing structural inequalities, gender-based, and racial discrimination. poverty, and weakness in child protection systems. Such structural inequalities are exacerbated in the periods during and after conflicts, and disproportionately affect children. At this time of pandemic, or even from the time of 2020 to 2022, child trafficking and other forms of trafficking were heightened due to economic and less stringent policies. Child trafficking is closely linked to the grave violations against children in armed conflict, as well as in times of, of violence. Uh, this include at the time of the pandemic where cases of child sexual exploitation has heightened and increased. So the research was framed to virtual becoming the norm during the time of pandemic. So pandemic created a perfect storm of increased violence against children. Reported cases of trafficking of children has increased during the pandemic. From the research, halfway houses and shelters for victims of survivors has closed its doors, and then gaps in the anti-trafficking sector and support for survivors widened because of the challenges brought about by the pandemic and the systemic factors that affected this crime to increase cases at the time of the pandemic. The study sought to answer what are the gains and challenges of anti-trafficking actors in the Philippines during the pandemic, analyzing the responses to such crisis and how do these actors come together as a movement to collectively respond. I utilized various theories and explanation and analysis from social movement to grounded theory of analysis and self-care framework. In addition, it included tools in stakeholder analysis, political mapping, network analysis, and power analysis in the movements of anti-trafficking actors. I would like to point out that the research approach used ethnography study of shelters and to anti-trafficking movements with participatory observations of staff. There were cases or instances of case study and report analysis shared by these movements as well as shelter organizations supporting survivors of trafficking. I also utilize ground theoretical approach and also review these non-profit or non-government organizations and the government agencies' policies with regards to anti-trafficking work. I would like to share with you that the conceptual framework that I've used. The study used an ethnography approach, as I've said earlier. So with the pandemic crisis impacting the way Philippine authorities respond to the increasing cases of trafficking, especially on sexual exploitation of children, I argue that movements and loose networks may arise from being deprived of a specific good, service, or resource. It transforms them to evaluate choices and come together. In addition, resources remain scarce, allowing them to further pool resources, coordinate and provide support to one another, thereby questions political and public policies or the power of the movement. I also argue that anti-trafficking actors respond actively and collectively when the government is weak in its response, providing them an opportunity rather to grow and flourish. The framework used the experiences and activities of these nonprofit organizations and agencies responding to human trafficking. The pandemic has affected the system, thus contributed in the development of collective movement that allows for policy changes in local and national level, such as the use of trauma-informed approaches in caring for victims. Now let me share with you some of the gains that has been the result of this research. What practices have been implemented by stakeholders to address new challenges faced in peacebuilding? So some of the gains learned from this study include that local NGOs creating a network of support of resources that allowed for stronger relationships and support. NGOs also were able to form a loose network strengthening the self-care strategies to a crisis by identified actors. These strategies supported how they interact with survivors and clients in their operations to prevent further re-traumatization or secondary trauma. thus leaning and further re-traumatization, thus leaning and exchange of good practices in these loose networks strengthen cooperation in the groups. So you can see an example of a network, the Philippine Interfaith Movement Against Human Trafficking, doing an advocacy program at the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons in 2021. Another gain during this pandemic is that case referrals and prevention mechanisms moved online, just like the way how education worked. Justice system in the Philippines has been technologically influenced due to pandemic. Now, I would like to share with you some of the challenges from these as a result of this research. I identified some challenges that include systemic issues of limited resources and leadership in crisis, of actors that impact policy advocacy in the prevention, prosecution, protection, and partnership of strong referral system. There is also a limited rhythmic interaction and synchronous response due to the pandemic. Shelters were closing its doors due to fear of infection of staff and clients. With the evolving phenomenon is also an evolving socioeconomic phenomenon of the crimes, limited and varied responses. Now, I would like to conclude with some of the learnings and lessons from this research. Here are some of the concluding results from the study, which include that anti-trafficking networks and movements amplify messages to policy, especially when a network has influence in the government. In the case of the Philippine Interfaith Movement Against Human Trafficking, its faith-based leaders supported the lobbying of the expanded anti-trafficking law of 2022 or the Republic Act 11862, which became a law in 2022, in last year. There is also an intensification of trauma-informed approaches by anti-trafficking network. In this case, a call for trauma support or ACTS is a movement that supports anti-trafficking actors, especially faith-based organizations, to counteract collective trauma of survivors and advocates. This arose due to collective impacts of NGOs from the pandemic. There is also recognized challenges in international social movement efforts on prevention and protection, which had been palpable due to weak and political policies and the lack of domestication of laws. In addition, localized policing and governance affects the socio-political landscape of human trafficking. I also would like to highlight that multidisciplinary and innovative interventions in this changing landscape must be addressed and prioritized. So I would like to end with the recommendations from the research conducted in consultation with the different anti-trafficking actors and two anti-trafficking movements. That one, further studies on anti-trafficking regional movements in a time of crisis. The research had only focused on this kind of cases at this time of a crisis during the pandemic. There should also be a strengthened discourse on conceptions of self-care for actors in crisis. We use the Foucauldian techniques of the self under modern capitalism. So it had been highlighted in the research that there should always be a highlight or a stress on these non-government organizations to focus on self-care, especially for the staff, supporting survivors of anti-trafficking so that they can be protected from secondary trauma and prevent themselves from further situations of trauma. There should always be a detailed look and focus of older anti-trafficking networks. Some of the networks were used or were new that were part of the research, the Philippine Interfaith Movement Against Human Trafficking, as well as the ACTS network. And in addition, a multidisciplinarity and innovative interventions must be addressed and prioritized. This means that we should also highlight the interventions by faith-based organizations in correlation with the government policies being implemented so that a strengthened support, not just for survivors of human trafficking, but also for non-government organizations. And that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. In the same discussion, I would like to ask maybe the research itself did not have any findings, but you can also respond to this question based on your experience. Have you or have the research figured out, or have you realized any differences in the approaches to address or approaches of intervention by the grassroots movements, and maybe between the grassroots movements and the national level interventions? Were there any differences? How were they adapted? Do you have any insights on this that you can share?
Sure. Thank you, Gayatri, for that question. Since the research had been limited in terms of participation of only 4 shelters, and these shelters are non-government organizations, plus 2, I would say, regional and national anti-trafficking movements, I realized that one, these anti-trafficking NGOs or shelters who are locally based, they would group themselves, pool the resources, work together. That could have a strengthened response to against human trafficking. But I also realized that in working with national actors or regional actors like in Metro Manila or in Mindanao, I've seen that they are more stronger, or they have a stronger sense of responses because they have bigger resources than local organizations. So that's one main difference. Really, there could be limited resources when we're talking about grassroots organization compared to national organizations. And number two, impacts would be different as well. So for more impactful response could happen because of cooperation, collaboration, partnerships of these local organizations than regional organizations or movements where they could only act as one and still have a more impactful response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's very insightful. Thank you very much for the great presentation and also your response to the question.
Thank you.
So next we would like to move to our alumni from Myanmar, Bauk Nu Aung, to present her paper on the role of education for social transformation in current Myanmar political struggle. Bauk, you can share your presentation and share your insights as well.
Yes. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. My name is Bauk Nu Aung, and I am from Myanmar, and I am an APS alumni cohort 10. And I am currently working as an education technical lead as an ethnic education sector. So today I will be presenting about the role of education for social transformation in current Myanmar political struggle. So in this presentation, I will be mostly focusing in Kachin context as it is most relevant with my work. And then this presentation is based on my work experience during these difficult times. Education is much more than what happened in school and university, because that's where we develop where our ideas of who we are and what we want to do. And that's why education can be seen as an important aspect of the social transformation for both peace building and current political challenges. Let me explain why. So you may see in this picture. So this is the current situation in Myanmar regarding in education sector. But this is not from Kachin state. Because I cannot mention the place where this photo was taken, so please understand that. So since we all know that COVID happened in 2020, and since that time, so no schooling. And then a year has passed, and everyone thought that maybe 2021 would bring us, a new, better luck. But then no, it changes when on February 1st, 2021, where the political situation in Myanmar turned upside down. And when that happened, especially in education sector, a lot of people involved started participating in what we call as civil disobedience movement, CDM. What it means is the teachers would quit their job and the children would not go to school because as a way to express of their opposition towards the political situation in Myanmar. And like that, the situation continues in 2021 to 2022. And because of that, the increased number of students, a lot of people are out of school. And due to that, there are a lot of children become a drug user and also some become a child prostitute. And this is especially, it happened very common in rural area because a lot of, we start to transform into an online platform virtual, but the parent does not have the enough knowledge of a social media control. So it is the backlash of the social media. And also, even when the school opened, there is a high tension of hate speech among students because of what is happening around them and inside Myanmar. The situation is very intense. And among them, the greatest challenges that the parents and the community face is the children are studying in the same grade since 2020, but they are become old age. So the parents and the community worry that their children might get old before they get an education. But I always believe that when there's a challenge, then there always come an opportunity if we look at from the positive side. So what are the opportunities? So the opportunity is that a lot of the civilians in Myanmar acknowledging that the formalization in national curriculum. And at first, a lot of people realize it, but there's nothing we can do. So we just continue. But since the political changes in 2021, a lot of people that, okay, enough is enough, and now we must do something. So they start to acknowledge that, and then also show support and interest towards ethnic local curriculum and school, which is a mother tongue-based multilingual education. So mother tongue-based education is learning education with a language that the children understand, and then later moving on to maybe official language of Myanmar, and then to a next language. And in this school, they also promote, the curriculum also promotes peace education and positive messages. For example, in one of the classroom, the elder asked the children, what do you think of like a Burmese person, at the same age as him? And then he said, no, he is a friend. But then the elder said, no, he is Burmese. Sometimes it's the elder because of the old education system. But then in this education system, the children see no different and they understand the coexistence and see as a human. So this is the positive thing happen in this school. And another thing is because of the children, a lot of people, children are out of school. There's a lot of continuous education program implemented by the local community. So these schools are implemented by the local community independently and without anyone's support. And so when this continuous education school open, especially the stakeholder of the local education service provider open to new initiative because they began to see what is needed when they teach at school because they do not want to repeat the same mistake that they have in their old education. That is including gender equity, disability, and social inclusion inside the classroom and also in school. And also giving psychosocial support towards the student because most of the children are in conflict-affected area, and also equipping the teacher with conflict-sensitive education because the teachers are the main facilitator of the classroom and also inside the conversation among the students. And also incorporation of peace education in the curriculum that they are using, and also incorporating social emotional learning in their everyday activities. So these are the new initiatives that the stakeholder has started to use. And also in the continuous education school, there has been new practices used. For example, as shown in the picture, sorry, I blurred the face because of the safety of the children. In this picture, they are doing a presentation about ethnic people within Myanmar in celebration of Union Day in last month, February 2023. So this has never happened in the government school before, because most of the activities are mostly teacher center and Burmanization center. But by giving by giving the presentation led by students, the students learn about other ethnic group as well as their ethnic group, and then how they have been coexisting for a long time. And this helps promote diversity inside the classroom and also promoting social inclusion inside the classroom. Because in this classroom, there's a lot of children, mixed race, mixed diversity, mixed ethnic group. So by giving a presentation about other ethnic group, it makes everyone feel belong in the classroom. And also in this continuous education, there are a lot of student-led initiatives that the students are very happy and proud to be a part of. I have a conversation with the student, and then they said that it was very great for them that they stopped going and they have an opportunity to study in this continuous education school, because without studying in this continuous education school, they wouldn't know that the student can lead inside the classroom or do activity that they can, and also negotiate with the teachers. So by that means, as all these things are happening right now, and also stakeholders are also continuing to do this work, in this continuous education classroom, that we can promote coexisting and learning together, which then can help to bring social transformation into a better world. And also the ethnic local school were coexisting for many years, but then however the government didn't recognize it. But if the government would recognize this ethnic local curriculum and school, then everyone can coexist within the education system and build towards the peace building from the grassroots level. So hopefully to have a brighter future for Myanmar. So this is my presentation, and thank you very much, Teju Pasai.
Thank you very much, Bauk, for your insightful presentation. I thought it is a very good definition of how complex are not only negative but also positive when they are transformed very well. So yeah, I would like to ask if you would like to share the changes. You said these positive transformations that you saw, you observed, that you found out in your research. How do you see these changes or interventions or these transformations evolving in future? What do you think? What factors would help? Who could be the actors that could be of help to sustain this transformation, if not even evolve through this transformation?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. And for me, I think first, let me answer on the teaching practices first, because people have not experienced this kind of, sharing about diversity or talking about diversity and how we have, coexistence for each other. It has never done in the previous government school before. But since in this continuous education school, some of the resources from the local curriculum were shared. And so that's how they were able to initiate new activity in their classroom. And with my experience from talking with the teachers and the students, they are happy to do more of this activity. But then the challenges are weight. That is, this continuous education school are not government recognized. So therefore, it is a little bit worrisome because these children, gradually they become, they attend 8th grade, but then it is not recognized by the government. So I don't know. So hopefully, if the government recognize this students' learning and maybe rejoin in the mainstream education and finish high school, and then maybe they can join into a university. So that's how I would imagine it to become. And also, hopefully, because of this political struggle, a lot of people know what it's meant to have, a different path and then work toward it. Like the new practices that they are teaching now, like promoting diversity, learning about coexistence. So I hope the teacher will keep on doing and also teach other colleagues for their professional development and for their future work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing. And then we would like to next move into the presentation by Reina Aris Bermudez to share her presentation on prospects of peace and durable solution amidst COVID-19, revisiting the Marawi city displacement during the COVID-19 pandemic. Reina is our alumna from Philippines, APS9. Reina, floor is yours.
Thank you, Gayatri, and good evening, everyone. So let me share my slides. Okay. So thank you for having me. My name is Reina Bermudez. I'm from the Philippines with the APS9 cohort. I'm currently the chief of the Center for Crisis, Conflict, and Humanitarian Protection of the Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines. So today I'll be providing a presentation which came from the work of our organization in relation to monitoring the situation of displaced communities affected by the Marawi City armed conflict in 2017. So just to give a brief background as regards what the Marawi City crisis is about, in May 2017, there was an armed encounter between the armed forces of the Philippines, the Philippine government, against the Moti group, which is a non-state armed group. And that armed conflict led to more than 1,000 deaths and more than 300,000 persons displaced. And from 2017 until up to today, there are still people who are displaced due to the armed conflict. And moving forward to 2020, we had COVID-19, and that had a lot of impact on the lives of those who have been displaced in Marawi. So part of our monitoring activities is to gather the situation, human rights situation of internally displaced persons or IDPs who have been affected by the Marawi City crisis. So some of the things that have happened over the pandemic to the displaced communities that they have experienced difficulties in observing physical distancing in IDP sites. There was lack of information as to their transfer from transitory shelters and rehabilitation. There were limited appropriate livelihood assistance for them. Basic services delivery was intermittent, particularly in areas wherein there are heavy lockdowns and community quarantines, which limited the mobility of both the service providers, such as the government and non-government organizations, as well as the IDPs themselves who have difficulties to move from their IDP camps going to other places. So there was also the issue of lack of access to clean water, lack of access to wash facilities, water and sanitation hygiene facilities in the evacuation and transitory shelters, which had a lot of impact on how IDPs can protect themselves from the virus, since if there's no access to facilities for sanitation, if there's no access to clean water, then that would be challenging for them to remain clean or to ensure that they will not be able to contract the virus. Hygiene kits were also not readily available for distribution to communities, since these are not usually programmed in the government relief services prior to the pandemic. So that entailed a lot of administrative and logistical changes so that these kits will be included in the provision of services to the displaced communities. There's also a limited availability of medicines and healthcare in general, as particularly during the surge of the virus, a lot of hospitals and healthcare facilities find it difficult to attend to the needs of all persons who need medical attention. Also, one of the bigger issues during the surge of the pandemic in 2020 was not all IDPs were included in what we call the Special Amelioration Program, or the social support program that the government provides for families to help them augment their expenses in relation to the pandemic, since it was during the time in the pandemic that there were lockdowns. A lot of businesses had to close because of the issues in relation to mobility, and because these IDPs, they say, they were not residents in the areas where they are staying, in the evacuation camps where they are not residents there. They cannot be included in the list of those who will be receiving special support or special amelioration coming from the government. So these are just some of the issues that they have faced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of them have been addressed as time moved on from 2020 to present, but still there are a lot of issues that remain. And these issues were the ones that we at the Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines have looked into and recommended and suggested steps on how the Philippine government can address these issues. So we have submitted our recommendations to the Philippine Congress in 2020 to include the following aspects. First, IDPs must be included in any of the welfare programming, may it be the Special Amelioration Program or other post-COVID-19 support programs that will be conducted or implemented by the government, as well as they have to be considered in relation to the community quarantines, as well as the revival of the local economy. Local governments of the Marawi City and the nearby municipalities must conduct as well site-specific epidemiological risk assessments in all areas to ensure that the geographical locations and the configurations in the IDP camps will not make IDPs more susceptible in contracting the virus. This one helps not just for the current COVID-19 pandemic, but also if there will be other health emergencies in the future, the risk assessments will inform how planning or of the IDP sites will be conducted. And said assessments must be used in setting up quarantine and post-quarantine policies. IDPs' access to healthcare and other essential services must be institutionalized as well, so that they will not be taken out of any list, or they will not be considered in the provision of welfare and other essential services, as well as to integrate them in the strengthening of the whole healthcare system, particularly in the inclusion and the health insurance infrastructure of the government. Healthcare services and conduct of mass testing and humanitarian assistance must be included in the humanitarian support to be provided in the to the Marawi IDPs. These have been forwarded to the Philippine Congress in 2020. Some of them have already been addressed. Many others remain unaddressed up to this time. So looking now at what the pandemic has done in the communities of displaced people in Marawi, we now look at what could be the prospects of peace and durable solutions for them, because it has been almost 3 years since the start of the pandemic, and in many ways the communities in Marawi have adapted to the changes that have been introduced because of the response to the pandemic. At present, still there are thousands of IDP families who are displaced by Marawi City crisis that have not achieved their durable solutions. When we say durable solutions, these are the solutions that the IDPs would want for themselves. May it be they resettle in different areas, they relocate to other communities, or they return to Marawi. And up to now, there have been concerns as to how and when IDPs will be able to achieve their durable solutions. On the legislative side, there have been positive improvements, such as the Marawi Compensation Law, which was passed in 2022, and we see it as a way of initiating healing, peace, and justice for affected IDPs. However, this has just been passed, but implementation remains to be seen, and we have to be vigilant in seeing how the implementation of the Marawi Compensation Law would be of best benefit to the IDP families who have to receive compensation from the government in relation to their displacement. Also, even though now that COVID-19 is no longer the same as what it was when it first happened in 2020, and that many communities and people have been vaccinated against the disease, it still lingers. And so long as there are families in Marawi that remain in displacement, they will remain at high risk of contracting the virus, particularly because of their circumstances of living in spaces with limited services and limited opportunities for them to exercise proper hygiene, or for them to be able to protect themselves from the virus. So long as they remain in displacement, the chances will always be high for them. And there's still a need to pass the IDP Protection Bill in the Philippine Congress. Currently, there is no law that provides a comprehensive protection for displaced persons in the country, and it's still there's still a need for such law to be passed so that protection for IDPs will be institutionalized in the Philippine legal system. So looking now, what are the lessons from the pandemic? What are the trends that we see could shape how peace and durable solutions can be achieved in the context of the Marawi crisis? One, as what we saw in the previous years, community organizing is key in ensuring protection for vulnerable populations. Through community organizing, these communities are able to have stronger voices that they can use to confront, to talk to the government on how their services could be better provided, so that their response will be relevant to the communities. Also, non-government organizations remain as community partners in reaching out communities that were seemingly forgotten by the government. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, wherein even the government itself was limited in the provision of its services, many NGOs were the ones who have been providing support to communities. Also, national human rights institutions have an important role to play in promoting IDP rights, even in the context of Marawi, wherein it is the National Human Rights Institution that continues to remind the government of its obligation to support IDPs even in the circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic. And even within the pandemic situation, political processes are still present, which could lead to opportunities for program implementation and social inclusion. Even though there's a public health emergency in the Philippines, there's still a lot of opportunities to improve services, to improve people's situation, and we would like to bank on those opportunities. And that's what we saw in the previous years of the pandemic. There have been a lot of the use of those opportunities so that communities will be further protected and their rights will be upheld even in circumstances of a pandemic. And with that, I would like to thank our colleagues for having me tonight and discussing the work that we have done in relation to COVID-19 in Marawi City. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Reina. I would like to ask if you could share one or two concrete examples of how have you observed these practices had transformed, maybe during or after COVID-19 pandemic, as in like certain stakeholders like community workers or civil society actors. how have you observed they transform their practices from before to after with the new challenges? If you could give us one or two examples.
Yes, thank you, Gayatri, for that. Well, previously, pre-pandemic, it was easier for many organizations to organize, and even for us as a national human rights institution, it was easier for us to come to the communities and look at the situation of a displaced person so that we can provide our recommendations to the government on how to address their issues. However, because of the pandemic, there have been a lot of limitations as to movement. And even moving forward, post the initial onset of the pandemic, the government remained very conservative in how they would let organizations and even the NHRI access the communities. So in that sense, there was some form of gatekeeping of the government saying we're the only ones who can do this because it's a pandemic. There's this limitation. But then again, we saw there that organizations have become very creative in the sense that they have made use of many other instances or opportunities to reach communities. For example, remote monitoring, as we call it, is what was done in the sense that we conduct our monitoring missions through phone, through text, and even through Facebook, wherein information can be easily shared with the target communities and with us as monitoring providers so that we can know their situations. And from there, we can still continue our interactions even remotely. So we see that also as an opportunity to strengthen the internal capacities of IDP leaders, that even though there are no, say, NGOs, CSOs that can go to them at a specific time or can go to them physically, they are able to monitor the human rights situations in their communities through the guidance of the partner organizations and also the NHRI. And we see that as a very good example of how we can be innovative, even in situations wherein there are limitations to movement, limitations to what we can do because of a public health emergency.
Thank you, Reena. I think it is a great example of how we navigate through challenges and thereby we transform and evolve with our practices. I think a very good example to how we deal with the pandemic and challenges as peace builders in different angles. Thank you very much, Reena.
Thank you so much, Gayatri.
And with that, we are going to move to the presentation from Lee Doan U Thao from APS 11 Vietnam. Lee will talk about peacebuilding practices on female informal collectors empowerment in waste management in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. Lee, you can share your presentation and move forward with your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri, for introduction. Can you see my screen? Yeah, thank you. So I'm Lee from Center for Environment and Community Research, and I am a APS cohort 11. Now I would like to share the practical experience that we work on the female informal waste collectors in a subject of waste management in context of COVID-19 in Vietnam. So I would like to share some background for you to understand about the situation. So in COVID-19 have very negative impact to Vietnam's economic. So in 2020, Vietnam GDP just only grows 2.9% compared to the 2019 is 7.7%. In context of environment aspect, so Vietnam is generates around 1.8 million tons of plastic waste per year. And in COVID-19, so people using more single-use plastic, and is include 8 to 12 consists of plastic bags, frequently this is discharged to the environment, river, and ocean. And according to the research, the vulnerable groups on this situation is the informal waste sectors, like the person who collect the waste and recycle the waste to like support their family and also like for their livelihoods. So that's why I and our organizations focus on empowering them. So we empowering like informal waste collectors through plastic value chain. So we conduct a research like to understand what is the current situation in Hanoi City. So at first you can see here like the map, like we mapping out how many like informal waste collectors living in the area. We found out is that 90% of them are women, and they migrate from the rural area to the urban for looking for the job and work in the waste sectors. So they are very independent because they know they belong no organization. So it's also the vulnerable the factors, and they work is almost 20 years for this job, and like every month they earn like 200 to 300 US dollar per month. But in the COVID pandemic, they lost like 50% of the income, and some people no income for many months, like in the COVID time. The second challenge for them is that they don't have any social insurance, like because they not belong to any organization, so they don't have any like social insurance as the other workers in the company. So it is also the challenges. And that's why well, our organization and I have the program, like we conduct a relief program, like emergency program for informal waste collectors. So we mobilize funding for financial support for 200 informal waste collectors. And we work with like local government, like women union, to open the bank for them. Like you can see the here, this is the first time they come to the bank, and they don't have any like bank account. Like this is the first time they fill the form, and it's also this is the activity that we can create, like we create the space that they access to the information, to the bank, to the financial support. So it's also the first time they receive that kind of support. Some people, some women are crying because they're so happy because they can receive the money during the COVID time. Yeah, so it is also the happiness when we see them receive the money. And this kind of job also haven't recognized by the government because it's also protect the environment, but because they are informal collectors, so it haven't get any recognition by the government. So during that time, we also create a policy dialogue to engage them in the dialogue, and then also share their contribution to the government. And the second activity that we support them is that we create a model. Like the model is called like women participate in sorting waste, collections and recycling low value plastic. So the main actor is here is the informal female waste collectors, and they, beside of their work that they collect the high value like recyclable waste, but we create this low value chain that help them to increase their income and also contribute to the collect the low value plastic head discharge to the environment. Also, it's the way we protect the environment. So this is very like helpful model to get them earn more their income, increase their income. And here is the pictures of some training classes that we conduct in the COVID time. So you can see here people stand like sit like space like one meters for training. And here, like in Vietnam rules, that the room meeting room not allow like not allow 20 above 20 people. So this is that we arrange people to make sure that they follow the guidance from the government. And these trainings also provide the information for these female. They know how to protect their health, how to work how to like work on their job with the safety. Yes, so and also provide the training for them on the sorting waste and collection waste and recycling. So here is some picture that they participate the training with us. And here is the waste that the informal waste collectors collected. So it's a lot, and some people here is the scale, the waste, and it's huge. It's a lot. You use the single-use plastic like plastic bags per day is a lot. So the way that people can collect for you and also bring to the recycle place is very meaningful to for the environment. Yes. And some success that I would like to highlight here. The first is that our organization is provide like financial support for 200 informal waste collectors, like the financial support up to like $40,000, and 150 informal waste collectors are trained because they don't have any training before. This is the first time, but they very like happy with that, and their income also increased. And through the model, we also engage like 9,000 households participate in the sorting waste assort. So sorting waste assort is not the habit of Vietnamese, but through the model, people can practice and then do the sorting waste assort. Is this the benefit way for people to manage their waste at home? And like 35 tons of low value plastic, like plastic bags, were collected. So through the models that we create, and this is all my presentation. Yes, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Lee. We are very happy to hear your experiences and how your organization navigated through your work during the pandemic. And since your presentation specifically spoke about women in informal sector, I would like to ask this question that have you noticed any specific challenges that you have faced or they have faced, your beneficiaries face, just because they are women? Gender stereotyping, it could be the social influencing factors because of gender. Anything that you would like to share with us that they have faced just because they are women, or you notice that they are facing just because they were women navigating through the pandemic?
Yes, thank you for the interesting question. So actually, these informal waste collectors, they also face like gender bias during the pandemic, and also their work as well, because they are female, so they will just like collect the very low and low value and also very like not good material like paper, or also the bottle is very cheap, like because they just like collect very low and sell a little money, compared to the men. They can drive a truck, or they can drive and they can collect the e-charge or e-waste like phone or television, and this is also sell more money like compared to the female. So it is also unequal pay during this their job. And the second challenge to them is that because they also face to gender violence during their work, and sexual harassment as well, because they work in the midnight. Yeah, some people like wake up very early, but some people work like all the day, and even they work in the night. So it's they face that kind of like sexual harassment during their work, and it's also dangerous. And I think the final thing I think is that because they are women, so they have to also support their family. And I asked some informal waste collectors, they said they have a husband go to the hospital, and she also take care him, and also take care the children. So it's also the double work for them. And this is the only job that they can earn for their livelihood, because they migrant from the rural area, and then they are very low education. So it's some challenge I can share to you. Yeah.
Lee, sorry, follow-up question, if I may take a bit more of your time. Any strategies that you have used to transform, like address these challenges, and especially I would like to bring the COVID-19 context here. Any strategies that you have adopted, any interventions you made, that would be interesting to hear for everyone. Any strategies or intervention adopted by your organization to address these challenges?
Yes, actually, this is though challenges is still exist. We also CCI, like our organization, just say try like is a part of solution. Like we just try contribute our solution to address so challenges. We try to keep the model, like this model is also their livelihood, because they work for their job is a long time ago, like it's for their life, for their living. And because of their education is still very low, we provide the training for them, but training is like process. You cannot like just one, and you have to provide more and then step by step to increase their awareness. And we work with local government and create the model, like we duplicate the models to next 2 years. So right now the model is still going on. Yeah, this is also the way to have the informal waste collector. They can also got information, got training, get the trainings, and also improve their income. Yes.
We look forward to hearing more about your model, maybe after the next 2 years.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm happy to share. Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we are moving to our last presentation by our alumni, Chamila Aisha P. Sangila. From Philippines, ALP5. Chamila will share about her work engaging Muslim women in the prevention of violent extremism in the Bangsamoro region. Chamila, you can take your time with the presentation. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gia. Let me share my short video to all of you. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. I'm Chamila Aisha Sangila, Salzburg Global Fellow and the project lead of Kababaihan,
Kapit-bisig para sa kapayapaan sa Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao or KBARM. KBARM aims to engage Muslim women in the prevention of violent extremism in the Bangsamoro region. The KBARM team and I are moving in 4 provinces in the Bangsamoro region such as Tawi-Tawi, Lanao del Sur, Maguindanao, and Sulu province. Thank you.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, Jamila, we can see it.
All right, thank you, G. Can you hear me? Okay, the paper that I'm going to share with you will be published, will be out next week, and it's entitled Women Can Help Prevent Violent Extremism in the Philippines, Engaging Muslim Women in the Prevention of Violent Extremism in the Bangsamoro region. And it will be published by Diplomatic Career on its International Women's Day Special Edition 2023. So we take a look at, you watch the different areas in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, and this paper is focused on those 4 areas. So yes, I'm Jamila from the Philippines, ALP5, and the founder of Women Empowered to Act for Dialogue and Peace in Mindanao. So my PVE journey or preventing violent extremism journey started as early as 2008 when I joined with the armed forces of the Philippines in collaboration with the religious institutions and many other partners in Lanao del Sur. So in the Philippines, there were already notable recorded violent extremist activities as early as 2012. But the turning point of my work was the May 2017 Marawi siege, wherein it greatly devastated the city of Marawi. And from there, on January of 2018, I started out, I relied mostly on my background as educator and peace building practitioner in Mindanao, where I reviewed open source documents and then attended web conferences on PVE and interviewed key informants from the military and then from the rebel groups, as well as those surviving relatives of these groups. And so in 2022, as you have seen in the video, I led an initiative that we engage with the different Bangsamoro groups in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Mindanao, particularly the Maranao, the Maguindanao, the Tausug, and the Sama women. So as a background, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao is an autonomous region in the southern Philippines, and it has 5 provinces, including the cities of Cotabato, Lamitan, and Marawi, which is the breeding ground of the violent extremist activities, according to conflict alert studies and many other studies conducted by UNDP, the Asia Foundation, UN Women, and many others. And very important to note that in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, violent extremism has persisted as one of the leading causes of conflict in the area, wherein the violent extremist groups such as the ISIS-affiliated Maoti group in Lanao del Sur, the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighter MILF breakaway group in the Maguindanao area, the Abu Sayyaf group in the islands of Basilan and Sulu, continuously recruit women to carry out attacks in the Philippines and in other areas. Although it extends beyond the branding of women as perpetrators, but these women serves as recruiters, finance and logistics facilitators, and conduit between the jihadist funds, receiving and distributing money from abroad to the Philippines and distributing it to different violent extremist groups in the Philippines. However, we must acknowledge that women are essential actors at the grassroots level and play an important role in countering extremism. So yes, you've seen in the video, in 2022, I've conducted 4 in-person consultation meetings in these areas, wherein I got the chance to engage with the women. Although the risk is high, and it was also during the COVID time. So although we are seated closely, having pictures and all, for the sake of taking photos, but we still observe the strict health and safety protocol during the conduct of the consultation meetings. And then how can women help prevent violent extremism in the Philippines? So I identified, based on the several years working and researching about violent extremism, I identified 6 important roles that women play in preventing violent extremism. We have 1, mothers as change makers; 2, women as providers and protectors; 3, women as promoters of gender-specific interventions; 4, women as mediators; 5, as peace builders; and lastly, women as environmental stewards. It is very important to acknowledge the role of mothers. All throughout, I engage with different kinds of women, especially mothers, because I, like being a mother as well, I can relate particularly to all the mothers that I've engaged with, that the mothers are often the first to detect early signs of radicalization, because the mothers are frequently monitoring the safety and movement of the communities in order to protect their children. And so there's really a need to look into some intervention to recognize the mothers and protect them for the risk to be targeted by the violent extremist groups. Women as providers. So in conflict setting, both men and women affected or impacted by conflict differently. But the sudden changes burden many women and girls greatly, and sometimes, and at most, during the 2017 Marawi siege, the 2018 Surabaya bombings, the 2019 twin bombings in Holo, women became breadwinners because they lost their counterparts, their male, their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, and the male figure in the family. And this greatly burdened them. And somehow, in keeping the family safe from further violence, they became protectors. And so another one is there should be a need to recognize the role of women as promoters of gender-specific interventions. One of those that I engage with, especially in Cotabato, they were frontliners of gender-specific interventions. They are employees of Bangsamoro Women's Commission. And really, there is a need to be leaders, women to be leaders in crafting gender-specific interventions for women and girls, and looking into the gender dynamics as seen in the radical roles of women. So there is really a need to put them at the front line, and this could be empowered by the different initiatives that we have, or the national plans that we have. Say, for example, the UNACR 1325 on women, peace, and security, the National Action Plan, and in the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, we have the Regional Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. And then the next one is women should be, women could also play as a mediators. Although women sometimes were putting at more risk in the local setting, but women are recognized as local mediators, and they prove more effective in settling clan feuds, and somehow they are welcomed by men to be a counterpart in mediating conflict. Women as peace builders. So women play important roles in organizations, government, academia, and all levels of peace processes in the civil society. So there is a greater need to refine the roles of women in peace building and empower them to be agents of positive peace. And lastly, as we have seen in the video, the conflict, the violent extremist activities created much more damage to the environment. So women should be at the front line as environmental stewards. In Marawi, it devastated the physical, biological, and environmental components. So to protect, conserve, and sustain the environment for the future generation, women need to be at the forefront of protecting biodiversity, conserving our natural resources, and promoting environmentally friendly practices. And in conclusion, so violent extremism will require a context-specific, gender and conflict-sensitive approaches. It will need a long-term process of building community cohesion and resilience. And with this, it is very essential and very important to examine the roles that women are playing in the past, roles that they are still playing in the present, and the roles that will be playing in the future, so that we can maximize the capacities and the capabilities in securing, sustaining, and keeping the Bangsamoro safer for the next generation. In the post-COVID challenges in the VE activities, the establishment of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao curtailed the violent extremist activities. And although the violent extremist groups took advantage of the COVID restrictions in which they are recruiting in person, but because the passing of the anti-terrorism law in the Philippines, it hampered the activities of the violent extremist groups in the area, and somehow their activities were isolated. And then many VE members eventually surrendered because of economic challenges that they were facing during the pandemic. So yes, thank you for this opportunity, G and Maya. So yes.
Thank you very much, Jamila. Yes, it is a very exciting work, and it was with a very good introduction. We understand we have a limited time, so thank you very much for summarizing. I know it's a difficult task, but summarizing your work, your research work. But in the same aspect, in the same research, we would like to hear if there were any findings about how violent extremism in the same context took different shapes during and after COVID-19, and were there any different different approaches that you have adopted, maybe not your organization, but if you have come across any different methods of addressing these challenges, and how it took different shapes, how violent extremism took different shapes during COVID-19. If you'd like to share a few insights with us, Jamila, thank you.
Thank you, Gia. If you could see the activities that we did during the pandemic, although these women attended the in-person consultation meeting, there is really high risk of being identified by the violent extremist groups. Although before these activities that we did in the communities, I personally did in the communities and in the academy, promoting preventing violent extremism, is quite, like the changes that we had prior to the pandemic and during and after the pandemic greatly affected mostly of those who are promoting the PCVE interventions in many different areas here in the Bangsamoro region. During the pandemic, we observed a very strict health and safety protocol, although this restriction benefited much on curtailing the recruitment of the violent extremist groups, but the activity shifted online. So they work more 24/7 recruiting online because it cannot be detected, especially if you are using Messenger, WhatsApp, on any other social media platforms that the government in the Philippines cannot eventually record these activities. Although here in Lanao del Norte and Lanao del Sur area, there are still ongoing recruitment. This is post-COVID, but now they are more careful with who they engage with, because before it would be easier to recruit members of their family and so on and so forth, but because they have records in the from the law enforcement, so they are, the law enforcement are eyeing them much, so they are much more careful with dealing with this recruitment process. Some of the practices that we personally I did during the in-person consultation meeting was to really move as, how can I say, unidentified in those areas that we went to. The anti-terrorism law eventually benefited in the island provinces in the Philippines, wherein most of our tourism, most of the tourism area in Sulu and in Tawi-Tawi were open to the public, when before the pandemic, it was really close. If you can just imagine seeing those white beaches, that is one of the one of the beautiful beaches in the Philippines that were in the island in Sulu and in Tawi-Tawi. But decades ago, you cannot eventually go to the area. And one of the practices that we did was to really coordinate with the local authorities. And then they were offering us to move around because of still there are presence of violent extremist groups in the area, and there are also a risk of identifying me, especially talking to these women and the women that we need to protect in the area. I don't know if I made sense, but those are the things that we did during the engagement with the Muslim women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamila. So thank you very much for all your presentations and sharing your experiences and your research findings with us. I would like to give floor back to Maya to finish our session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gayatri. So now we come to the end of the event, and thank you very much to all the presenters for sharing your peace building work during and after COVID-19 in a different context, such as the grassroots movement of anti-human trafficking in the Philippines, promotion of the inclusive education in Myanmar, community support and policy recommendations for the IDPs in Malawi City, Philippines, empowerment of women in waste management in Vietnam, and prevention of violent extremism with the Muslim women in Bangsamoro region, Philippines. The COVID-19 pandemic impacted human lives, societies, and also the environment in the Asian region as the whole world had to deal with the crisis. We have experienced the many challenges to overcome, but have also witnessed areas of development and opportunities for transformation. I'm very impressed with the APS alumni's dedication and hard work in their teaching, research, and advocacy. I realize again that our small collective actions become a seed of change, and we'll move the difficult situations, even if it takes time. We need to strengthen unity more than ever. I hope the audience could enjoy learning from the shared stories and also found some ideas to apply in your works as well. Well, thank you very much again to all the presenters. And last but not least, on behalf of the University for Peace and APS Alumni Network, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to the Nippon Foundation for their generous support in implementing our activities. So thank you very much and see you all very soon. Thank you.